I don't pay you to sit on a couch, Dean sneered. Right there on Zoom, cameras on, mic hot, eyes squinting like he'd just smelled something beneath him. The whole team call froze. Even the brown-noser intern stopped typing. I didn't say a word. Just sipped my cold coffee, stared at the grinning bastard on my second monitor, and mentally noted the timestamp. Thursday, 9:02 a.m., October 17th. The exact moment that smug little gym rat cut off his own air supply and didn't even know it. I'd warned him. Twice. Hell, I'd even attached a screenshot from the back end showing the system prep cycle had already entered pre-test phase. Our compliance architecture isn't some dusty checklist in a spreadsheet. It's a living, breathing simulation engine with a heartbeat. And when that heartbeat detects a live audit window, it does one thing. It starts the penalty clock. 100 grand. Every hour. Tick, tick, tick. Only one person has keys to that lock. And he just got booted off the VPN by a man who thinks compliance infrastructure means yelling at IT interns and flexing in the break room. By 9:04 a.m., my access was gone. Admin privileges revoked. Server authentication wiped. VPN handshake denied. Dean claimed it was temporary, said it was just to send a message. Message received, buddy. You just removed the only operator certified to disarm your ticking financial time bomb. And that's not metaphor. I'm talking about a literal simulation that replicates federal breach conditions and penalizes us in real time if it detects inactive supervision. Guess who wrote that script? Guess whose name is on the override clause? I didn't fight him. Didn't call HR, didn't waste breath trying to educate a man whose most complex line of code is probably his Planet Fitness pin. I just logged out, sat back, watched the email from security roll in confirming termination of access. And I smiled. Not because I wanted revenge. I've got a terminally ill wife upstairs and zero interest in boardroom gladiator games. But because I knew. I knew what Dean didn't. Knew what the board would learn the hard way. Knew that silence isn't surrender. Sometimes silence is the fuse. And hey, since you're here, listening to this whole mess unfold, do us a favor. 97% of people never hit that subscribe button. Be the 3%. Hit like, subscribe. It keeps this team fueled and this story rolling. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this one ends. So I waited. Quiet as the grave. I knew what was coming. The chairman had been hinting all month about a surprise simulation to impress the investors. Some stress test to showcase system readiness. Dean had laughed it off in the group chat like it was a fire drill for nerds. What he didn't know, what no one bothered to learn, was that I'd hardwired the penalty system into the simulation after our last near breach. My idea, my code, my lockdown sequence. There's no pause button without my credentials. And now? Now they'd need a damn seance to find me. I still remember the last thing Dean said before I logged off. Maybe next time, show up in person if you want to be taken seriously. Cute. Real cute, coming from a man whose biggest career risk was switching from almond milk to oat. That same day, I filed a compliance exemption document noting in plain English that I'd been forcibly removed from the live test pipeline. I copied legal, timestamped the upload, and even dropped a copy in the offline compliance vault. Let them try to say I went rogue. Let them try to say I was negligent. The paperwork's already smarter than the man in charge. Meanwhile, upstairs, my wife coughed herself awake and asked if I'd gotten fired. I told her no, just freed up. She laughed through a rasp and said, well, that couch better pay off. I squeezed her hand, kissed her temple, and went back downstairs. Back to the empty screen. Back to the system I built and the grenade they just armed. Let the countdown begin. The first thing I did was open a support ticket. Polite, clinical, all the right buzzwords. Urgent. Compliance system admin access revoked. Impact to live simulation readiness. I marked it red. Attached my credentials. Quoted the specific clause from our federal audit guidelines that requires uninterrupted oversight of real-time simulations. That clause wasn't a suggestion. It was law. The kind of law that comes with 6-figure fines and federal flags if breached. But it sat in the queue like a dead rat on the porch. No acknowledgement, no response, just silence. So I escalated. Drafted a compliance risk alert using our own internal tooling. Uploaded the memo to the audit risk registry with full documentation. Who revoked access? when, and what the system status was at time of lockout. I flagged legal, CC'd Dean, even tagged the compliance liaison in Australia just so it pinged someone while our side slept. 2 days passed. Nothing. Not even a read receipt. And then came the cherry on top, a Slack screenshot forwarded to me by a teammate too nervous to reply. Dean, mid-thread, typing like he was holding court. This guy thinks we're going to fail an audit because he's not plugged in? Please, it's compliance, not brain surgery. The real problem is people thinking they're irreplaceable. A few laughing emoji reactions, some gif of a guy sipping tea. That same teammate, quiet kid named Jeremy, added in his message, I think he's in way over his head. No kidding, kid, but he's still the one driving the car. I thought about responding. Thought about firing back with a timeline, a list of incident IDs, even just a calm reminder that I wasn't trying to win a turf war. I was trying to stop them from walking blindfolded into a live grenade. But what's the point? The whole system was designed to raise flags automatically. If no one was reading the dashboard, they weren't going to read an email. And if they didn't respect the guy who built the damn firewall, they sure as hell weren't going to respect his warnings. Then came the chairman's announcement. Email subject line. Investor simulation, Friday 10:30 a.m. ET. No preamble, no prep call, just a calendar bomb dropped in everyone's inbox with less than 48 hours notice. Live stream, full review, system performance metrics shown in real time for the board, and a handful of outside investors. Dean reacted with all the grace of a frat boy prepping for finals. Posted, "Let's rock this" in the team channel and told IT he'd run point. No mention of me, no reinstated access, no contingency plan. I sat there that night, watching the blue light of the monitor flicker across our living room ceiling, listening to the whir of the oxygen machine upstairs. My wife had fallen asleep with a book on her chest again. Too tired to finish the chapter, too stubborn to admit she needed help turning the page. That's why I went remote in the first place, not for comfort, not to sit on a couch, but to keep her breathing while I kept the company safe. So I stopped. Stopped emailing, stopped warning, stopped fighting for a seat at a table I built. I pulled up the simulation backend one last time on my local instance, read-only view now that my credentials were revoked, and watched the countdown initiate its warm-up cycle. Dean didn't know the system had been calibrated to real audit flags, didn't know the chairman had greenlit penalty triggers, didn't know there was no override without a live signature from the designated custodian, didn't know that custodian was me, but he would. Soon. Because that timer was going to start, and no one, no IT manager, no junior dev, no frat brain director with a Bluetooth headset and a whiteboard full of buzzwords, was going to be able to stop it. And when it started, I wouldn't need to say a word. I'd already spoken. They just didn't listen. The moment the lights dimmed in the boardroom, you could almost feel the smug buzz coming off Dean's stupid haircut. He stood near the screen like a TED Talk dropout, sleeves rolled up just enough to show a forearm tattoo he probably got during some transformational sabbatical in Tulum. He cleared his throat, said something about real-time resilience demonstration, and flashed the investors a smile that screamed, "Don't worry, Daddy's got this." The chairman nodded once. "Begin simulation." That's when it started. The screen blinked blue, then black. The room settled. Someone coughed. Legal flipped open a binder. CFO clicked her pen. Then, ping. Red. Dead red. The whole screen turned blood red like a kill alert in a sci-fi movie. Then the box popped up. Center screen 12 inches tall. Bold white text screaming over the silence. Active test environment. Unsecured module detected. Penalty clock initiated. And below it, in bigger font, 100,000 HR in breach fines. Dean's face twitched, just a little, like a man realizing the elevator cable just snapped. Behind him, the engineers shifted. One of them, a kid in a rumpled hoodie and Vans, whispered, is that real?" The compliance monitors started spitting live log data, flagged assets, module vulnerabilities, system handler ID, null. Legal's pen stopped mid-scratch. Dean took one careful step toward the console and said, Okay, let's just pause it for a sec," and tapped the keyboard like he was swiping at a vending machine. Nothing. He tried again. "Why can't I log in? Where's my override?" No one answered. The CFO leaned forward, squinting at the penalty counter. It had already jumped. $100,000, then $200,000, then $300,000. Every 60 seconds, another 100 grand bled onto the boardroom screen like a stock ticker in hell. Dean turned to the engineer. Alex, can you kill the simulation from your end? Alex looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. We don't have root access to the test environment. It's sandboxed. You need Ward. Dean blinked. Ward? As in Malcolm Ward, the engineer said. And there it was. That moment. That tiny, sharp crack in Dean's voice when reality tapped him on the shoulder and said, "You done fucked up." The chairman didn't say anything at first, just stared at the red clock climbing 6 figures a minute. Then, slowly, he sat back and folded his arms. Is this part of the demo? No, Legal said without looking up. This is the demo failing. Dean puffed up like he was going to bark some order, probably to buy time, but nothing came out. Because deep down, even his LinkedIn-optimized brain had to be screaming, you were told. You were warned. And now the walls are bleeding money while the only person with a mop is watching from home. Someone knocked over a water bottle. The clock read $400,000. Legal pulled a page from the protocol binder and underlined something with a shaking pen. Override authority is still registered to Malcolm Ward. No transfer filed. Clause 12-2. Dean flinched like someone had slapped him across the face with a subpoena. He's remote, he muttered. He's not, I thought we had coverage. You thought wrong, the CFO said flatly. You revoked his VPN. Dean turned, mouth half open, trying to form a sentence that wouldn't hang him in front of God and investors. But it was too late. The lights weren't just dim now. The whole room was drowning in red. And outside that boardroom, I was in my living room, watching the sun rise through the curtains. I'd turned off all notifications, poured a cup of tea, and queued up the backup logs for my personal archive, because I knew exactly what they were seeing. And I knew they weren't even halfway to the bottom yet. Dean's hands were shaking now, visibly. Not in some dramatic TV way, but the subtle, pathetic twitch of a man who just realized he's driven his dad's car off a cliff and is still pumping the brakes like that's going to stop the fall. He jabbed at the console again, muttering under his breath, then yanked out his phone like IT was some magic fix-all he'd forgotten to summon. Yeah, this is Dean Harville, he barked into the speaker, voice already cracking. I need admin override on the compliance sim, full access to the back end. Now. A pause. More blinking red. Then came the voice on speaker, clear and unflinching. Sir, the only person with back-end override is Malcolm Ward. Per platform architecture, no secondary keys exist. Dean's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No, he's not active anymore. We revoked his VPN. He's not even on the IT voice interrupted, like a school principal reciting detention policy. Override assignment is based on designation, not login status. Clause 12.2 of the Compliance Charter. Only the designated compliance architect may authorize or disable active simulations. A chair scraped. Legal snapped their binders shut. The CFO's pen froze mid-signature. Get me legal, Dean hissed, already knowing what he was about to hear, but hoping, praying, someone would give him a cheat code, a loophole, anything. Legal didn't even look up from the policy doc. Clause 12.2, page 43. Override rights belong exclusively to the assigned compliance architect unless formally transferred. There's no record of a reassignment. Dean stood there, hollow-eyed. But he's remote. He's not even on site. We can't run a federal-facing audit with a guy working from his living room. It's not about where he sits. Legal cut in. It's about who built the damn system. Silence. Heavy. Full of teeth. Then the chairman leaned forward, just slightly. So to be clear, we initiated a live simulation in front of investors that auto-triggers real-world penalty tracking, and the only person who can deactivate it was locked out. By you? Dean swallowed. We didn't think it would activate. It's never triggered in demo mode before. Because Malcolm always ran the demo mode, the CFO said slowly, like she was explaining gravity to a child. He's the reason it didn't trigger. Until now. Dean stammered something about trying to reinstate access. He waved at one of the engineers, Alex, who backed up like he'd just been handed a live grenade. Reinstate him. Now. Dean barked. Alex tapped a few keys, then looked up, pale. His credentials were fully deprovisioned. It's not just the VPN. His entire admin certificate was scrubbed. We'll need to request new authorization from security. How long does that take? Legal asked, already knowing. Alex hesitated. Normally, 72 hours. If we expedite and get Ward's cooperation, maybe 90 minutes. Dean spun back toward the chairman, sweat starting to gather under his collar. I didn't think, look, I'll take responsibility. Let's just call him. We'll fix it. The chairman's jaw flexed, his expression a perfect stillness that said he wasn't mad. He was beyond it. He gestured toward the clock on the screen. $800,000 and climbing. He turned slowly toward Dean. Tell me again, who decided to lock out the only person authorized to stop that timer? Dean opened his mouth, then closed it, because there was nothing left to say. And for the first time since he strutted into that boardroom with his rolled sleeves and his trust me grin, Dean Harville didn't look like a director. He looked like a man who just realized the building was on fire, and he was the one who yanked the sprinklers out of the ceiling. And I was home, watching nothing, checking nothing, just waiting. Because I knew the moment was coming when they'd remember exactly who kept them fireproof, and exactly what it cost to ignore him. The first call went straight to voicemail, then the second. By the third attempt, they switched to speakerphone so everyone could hear the silence. No ringtone, just a sterile automated voice. The person you are trying to reach is unavailable. Please leave a message after the tone. Dean's face was a whole new color now, not red, not white, something in between. Grayish, like printer paper after a coffee spill. He jabbed at his phone, typing fast, trying to reach Malcolm via text, Slack, WhatsApp. Hell, probably tried Morse code with a flashlight for all I know. Nothing. Then Legal tried the email on file, and that was the moment the weight of it all hit the room like a freight train at 90 miles an hour. Bounced. Hard. Delivery failed. Access restricted. User not authorized. The bounce message looked almost smug, hanging there on the big screen under the penalty timer like a signature in red ink. Below it, the counter kept ticking. $900,000, then $1,000. The room was dead quiet, except for the hum of the air conditioner and the faint, rhythmic click, click, click of a ballpoint pen in Legal's hand. Dean stood frozen, eyes darting like a cornered raccoon. No one came to his defense. Not Legal, not the CFO, not Alex from engineering, not even the chairman, who now sat with his hand resting against his temple, staring at Dean the way someone stares at a clogged toilet that just burped. And then, from the far end of the table, barely above a whisper, came a voice, one of the newer analysts, a kid named Jules, fresh out of grad school with more idealism than paychecks under her belt. She said, almost to herself, "He warned us." Dean turned, but the words hit like a slap, because everyone heard it, the truth of it, the ugly, quiet, humiliating truth. Malcolm warned them, repeatedly, and they ignored him, mocked him, locked him out. The chairman exhaled slowly, then turned, deliberately, to face Dean again, and for the second time that day, he asked it, this time quieter, more cutting. Tell me again, who decided to lock out the only person authorized to stop that timer? Dean tried to speak. You could see his lips forming some defense, some spin, but the words refused to come. Maybe they'd finally choked him. Or maybe he knew any sound he made would only dig the grave deeper, because this wasn't just a compliance issue anymore, it was public shame. His shame. Broadcast live to investors who were watching from glass offices, beach homes, and boardrooms around the country, each one wondering how this company let $1 million hemorrhage go unchecked because some hotshot director thought remote work meant irrelevant. Dean looked at the screen as if the counter might stop out of pity. It didn't. 1.1 million. Tick, tick, tick. Nobody asked what to do next. Nobody moved, because the only person who could fix it wasn't answering. And me? I was upstairs feeding my wife a spoonful of applesauce. She smiled at me through tired eyes and whispered, "You look calmer today." I kissed her forehead and said, "The fire is burning itself out." Because they could call, They could beg, they could scramble all they wanted, but when a man builds the whole safety net and you rip it out from under him, you better hope to hell you never need to fall. Tick, tick, tick. 6 hours. That's how long the penalty clock bled on the screen. Cold, merciless, digital red ink tallying up the consequences of one man's ego and a company's arrogance. $100,000 an hour, like a metronome for humiliation. By hour 6, we were sitting at a clean $600,000 in breach exposure. Not theoretical. Real enough that the general counsel had removed her glasses and was rubbing her temples with both hands, muttering something about fiduciary nightmares. The engineers had stopped pretending to troubleshoot 2 hours ago. There was nothing left to reboot, nothing left to route around. The system wasn't down. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do: simulate non-compliance under real audit conditions and escalate penalties until override. Except the override key didn't exist anymore, because we shredded it. Dean paced like a zoo animal, trapped in a cage he built with his own bright ideas and empty authority. Every few minutes he'd circle back to Alex, ask the same question, "Can we spoof his credentials?" and get the same answer. We'd trip the watchdog checksum. That would escalate penalties to real-world compliance violation status. Translation? Try to fake Malcolm's access, and the system assumes you're tampering during an audit. That bumps the fine to $250,000 an hour and triggers an alert to our federal compliance contact. You don't come back from that with a PR spin. You come back from that with an external audit team and a full-on investigation. By hour 4, investors had started quietly logging off the stream. 2 stayed on, presumably to see how far we'd fall. One sent a text to the chairman, short, brutal, and read aloud by accident when his iPad mirrored to the screen. "Is this an actual simulation, or are you people this incompetent?" The chairman didn't respond. He just stared at the number. $500,000, then $550,000, then $600,000. Tick, tick, tick. That's when legal, voice low and stunned, said, "We found something." Everyone turned. She flipped a page in the binder and slid it forward. Not a policy, not a panic note, a form, dated, signed, time-stamped. Compliance Oversight Reassignment Waiver. It read in clean font, filed by Malcolm Ward, dated the morning after Dean revoked his access. The description was as plain as daylight. Effective immediately, I no longer possess authorized access to the compliance simulation platform. I have been forcibly removed from system responsibilities. This constitutes a transfer of risk and accountability to executive operations until access is restored. Dean took one look and went pale. The CFO whispered, "It's airtight." Legal nodded grimly. It was filed properly, uploaded to the compliance archive. Notification receipts were CC'd to our distribution list, including Dean. No one responded, which means the liability's ours. The chairman finished, his voice hollow. All of it. Dean's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, he didn't even try to argue. The engineers sat frozen. Nobody typed, nobody blinked. The CFO looked up from her phone. "We've lost 2 investor meetings, one pulled out of the Q4 round, the others asking for a full audit trail on simulation response protocols. What do I tell them?" No one answered. Because what could you say? We broke the system. We locked out the builder. We ignored the warnings, and now we were paying the bill. Tick, tick, tick. I was in the kitchen, feeding my wife broth. She asked what the beeping noise was. Turns out I'd left the compliance dashboard open on the tablet, muted, but still rolling the clock in real time. I tapped the screen off, let it climb. They weren't done learning yet. At 3:47 p.m., the clock turned over to $900,000, and the room felt like a pressure cooker begging for a release valve that didn't exist. Dean had stopped pacing. His voice had cracked hours ago, now reduced to whispering to himself in short, fragmented prayers to any tech god who might conjure up a back door. Legal sat cross-armed and silent, lips a tight line, while the chairman hadn't moved in 20 full minutes. Just stared, stone-faced at the 6-digit hemorrhage glowing from the center screen. Then the doors opened. No knock, no announcement. Just the quiet, solid sound of leather soles on polished floor. Malcolm walked in wearing the same soft gray sweater he always did. No suit, no tie, no expression, just calm. In his left hand, a flash drive. In his right, a manila folder, one page inside, folded neatly, the signed compliance waiver with the timestamp circled in red Sharpie. He didn't look around, didn't pause to gloat or grandstand, just walked to the console like it was still his office, like he'd never left. Dean started to speak, some choked-up attempt at apology or explanation, probably, but Malcolm didn't so much as flinch in his direction. Not a glance, not a word. He placed the flash drive into the port, typed 8 keys, paused, pulled the folder from under his arm and slid it across the table, directly to Legal, not Dean. She opened it, scanned the circled timestamp, and nodded once without lifting her eyes. The chairman gave the faintest tilt of his head in approval. Then Malcolm sat. Just like that. Like a man flipping a breaker in a burning building, he logged in, bypassed the watchdog triggers, authenticated his override, and shut down the simulation. 18 seconds. That's how long it took to stop 6 hours of bleeding. The clock froze. The red screen blinked off. The silence was absolute. No cheers, no applause. Just breath, finally returning to lungs that hadn't worked right all afternoon. Malcolm turned to Legal and spoke for the first time. System stable, logs intact, no damage to archival records. She nodded. Thank you, Mr. Ward. He stood. Dean moved like he wanted to intercept him. Maybe shake his hand, maybe grovel. Nobody cared at that point. But Malcolm walked right past him. No eye contact, no pause. Like Dean didn't even register as human anymore. Just another malfunction in a system built to expect failure. He walked to the doorway, turned back only once, to the chairman, not the room. You'll want to audit internal access policies. Clause 9.4 has been violated 6 times today. That's not on me anymore. Then he left. No speeches, no vengeance, just control, surgical and cold, and $1 million worth of lesson left ringing in every corner of that boardroom. Malcolm was already halfway to the parking lot when the chairman caught up. No security escort, no dramatic shuffle, just the soft click of polished shoes and a quiet, Mr. Ward, 1 minute. Malcolm turned, expression unreadable. The chairman didn't ask twice, just gestured toward the side conference room. Legal was already inside, waiting, a red folder neatly centered on the polished table. The silence was heavy, not awkward, but deliberate, like the air itself had agreed not to speak unless spoken to. Malcolm didn't sit at first, just stood there, arms relaxed at his sides, eyes sweeping the room like he was scanning for any last trace of bullshit. Finding none, he finally pulled the chair out, lowered himself slowly, and folded his hands on the table. The chairman slid the folder across. Consulting agreement, he said, voice flat but respectful. Remote only, full autonomy, triple your previous rate. You'll report directly to the board from now on. No director-level interference, not even mine. Malcolm didn't reach for the folder. He just looked at it, looked at the chairman, then looked at Legal. She nodded. All controls will route through you. You retain exclusive override authority. We've also appended indemnification language, this time with teeth. He opened the folder, scanned the pages in silence. Then, with the same calm he used to shut down $1 million hemorrhage, he signed. No questions, no revisions. Just a quiet correction in a world that had spun too far off balance. Dean wasn't in the room. No one said his name. But when the chairman's phone buzzed, he read the message silently and said only, "He's being placed on administrative leave pending internal review." Malcolm nodded once. No gloating, no smile, just a man who had seen fire, been blamed for not holding the hose, and then been handed the keys to the hydrant. The chairman leaned forward, laced his fingers together. "I misjudged the optics of your remote status. That won't happen again." Malcolm looked up. "It shouldn't have happened the first time." The words weren't angry. They weren't bitter. They were clean, precision cut. Legal closed the folder. Malcolm stood. As he reached the doorway, the chairman said quietly, "Is there anything else you need?" Malcolm paused, hand on the handle. "Yeah, make sure your next director knows the difference between a couch and a firewall." And with that, he walked out. No parade, no press release, just protocol, reinstated, and finally respected. A week later, they held the investor debrief over Zoom, cameras on, voices tight, every executive wearing their most expensive apology disguised as a blazer. The chairman stood in front of a polished slide deck titled Post-Simulation Compliance Enhancements, clicking through bullet points like they could cover $1 million scar with a fresh coat of optimism. There were nods, measured ones, the kind you give when you know someone's finally doing what they should have done 6 months ago. Then the slide changed. White background, minimal text, one single line, centered. Compliance Platform Maintainer, Malcolm Ward, Independent Custodian. The room didn't make a sound. The words didn't need flair. They carried the weight of 6 hours, $900,000, and every ounce of credibility they'd nearly flushed. One of the investors, an older guy with a Boston accent and no patience for fluff, leaned forward on his screen and asked, "That penalty system, is it still live?" The chairman didn't answer. He didn't have to, because that's when my camera turned on. No suit, no virtual background, just me in a worn gray sweater sitting on the same couch that got me locked out in the first place. I looked directly into the lens. "Yes," I said, "and I'm always watching the clock." Nobody laughed. They just nodded, one by one. The last slide appeared. No text, no branding, just the simulation dashboard, the red penalty timer. Paused, silent. And beside it, my digital signature, burned in like a watermark, permanent. I closed the call. Didn't wait for questions. They didn't need any. Upstairs, my wife was sleeping. The sun had just started creeping through the blinds. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat back down, and opened my console. Not to gloat, not to watch them sweat, just to watch the clock. Because the thing about fire alarms, you don't need to pull them to know they work. You just need to know who wired them. I may sit on a couch, but I built the fire alarm, and I'm the one who knows where the switch is.